Welcome back to Midlife by Design. I'm your host, Lisai, human design teacher and coach for midlife women, helping you shed the shoulds and remember who you came here to be. If you love this pod, I have added a donation link to support more shows coming out. I love creating and producing these episodes for you, and they're also not free to do that. So any donation helps if you feel the pull to put some money toward this pod, $1, $5, $10, whatever. And free ways to support me are to make sure that you are following the show, to leave a review, and or to share it with a friend. Sharing is such a beautiful way to spread the love. I am so appreciative when you do that. So today's episode is the final in a series about the 4 transformations, and today we are focused on motivation, looking at both the arrow direction and then the specific color level of the motivations. So this is all about what drives us, and it's almost like another piece of our personality. It's kind of like how we just are in the world. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, beauties. Class is back in session. Today, we are focusing on motivation, which is the last of the 4 transformations. And if you remember, the 4 transformations are the arrows at the top of your chart, and they go in progression. So they start at the top left, and then the bottom left, and then move over to the bottom right and up to the top right. And so we are on the top right. And if you need to go back to listen to the episodes that are about each of those arrows and what they mean, then the first one is digestion, which is that top left arrow. That's episode 69. The second one is environment, which is the bottom left, and that is in episode 71 and 73. I had to break that into 2. And then perspective is the third arrow, bottom right, and that is episode 74. So if you haven't listened to those yet, I would encourage you to go back and do that first before you listen to motivation, because as I said, they build on one another. It's like you want to work on digestion first and getting those elements into play before you work on getting your environment into play. And then that sharpens your perspective and eventually will sharpen your motivation. And motivation is all about how we conceptualize. It's our natural intelligence. And it's because it's about our cognition, it really is about sharpening it through these other transformations. So we're going to talk about motivation today. And again, I want you to understand that it can be skewed if your digestion, for example, is way off. And especially in midlife, in perimenopause or menopause, a lot of women are having digestion issues or gut health issues, after years of eating crap or eating things that maybe aren't as supportive for our bodies. So getting that into alignment and working with your specific human design digestion, for example, high sound, listening to music or listening to a podcast or something while you are eating, even just those small steps, which seem really simple, can be literally transformative, which is what this whole part of human design actually teaches. So getting those pieces in order is going to sharpen your motivation and the way that you're able to understand things and the drive that you have to understand them. So in talking about motivation, you want to have your chart in front of you. I have motivation now on my chart. So when you go to my website, www.lorilisai.com, and download your chart, you'll be able to look over on the right-hand side at the results and see it'll just be spelled out for you what your motivation is. You can also see it in the arrows. So if you're looking at the arrows, again, this is going to be the one that's on the top right, and you want to look at both the direction of the arrow and the color of the arrow, which I don't mean color in the way that it shows up on my chart, which would be like a teal, a dark green, blue arrow. When you're looking at the arrow and the numbers that are beneath it, that color is the number. Okay, and there are actually two numbers under the arrow. So I want you to look at the one on my chart that's the bigger of the two numbers. That's going to be your color. Okay, somebody sent me a message and asked, like, where do I find this? Where do I find the actual color number? I'm not quite sure. So I just want to be sure that you can find it. You're looking at the arrow direction, and then the color is going to be the bigger number of the two on my chart generator. So let's talk a little bit about the idea of color, which I should have addressed probably in the first episode of this series, but here we are. So color, I love the metaphor of a prism for explaining what color means, because you have the beautiful crystal itself as the prism, right? You have this physical piece itself. But what happens is when the light hits it and refracts and then moves out of it or onto the other side and is projected, it's like those colors come through that prism. And it's similar with how color works in our human design. It's like we have our physical vessel, which our subconscious side of the chart dictates that body part. Then we have our personality side, which is the right-hand side of the chart, and all of those gates and numbers there. Those dictate how we express ourselves. And then the color that comes through is part of what's called substructure, which just sort of colors all of the rest of our design and how and why we do the things that we do. So I love the metaphor of the prism and just how it emits this color, because it's very similar to how human design coloring works. So let's talk about the arrow direction as it pertains to motivation. And arrow direction goes even deeper than what I have covered in the last few episodes here in this series. So let me know if you want me to go deeper on this. I can do another pod on it, but for now, I'm trying to keep these pieces relatively simple so we can just understand the basics of it, and then we can build upon that. So this arrow in particular is about your awareness and your mind, as I mentioned, that natural intelligence. And this is where we get into the idea of the passenger and the driver that Ra talks about when he's talking about human design, and you being the passenger inside the vehicle. The vehicle is your body, moving you along, and you want to be the passenger along for the ride. So this motivation is that intelligence as you're in the car watching things unfold for you. I consistently think of The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, as such a great example of so many of the teachings of human design, in terms of just being part of kind of this big game and letting things unfold and believing that you are capable of so much more than you have been taught to think that you're capable of. So if this arrow for your motivation is facing left, then you have what's called strategic awareness, which, remember, all of the arrows, when they're facing left, they have that much more strategic, masculine kind of feel. If it's right facing, then you have a receptive awareness. Again, going back to the idea of right facing being more feminine oriented, masculine, versus the masculine as the left. So more flowy, more receptive, more open to receiving versus strategizing. So with left facing arrows in this area of your chart, there's a survival theme here. There's kind of a feel of scanning for safety, of conceptualizing things and strategizing things so that you can be safe, so that things work out for you. It's very intentional kind of energy. And you end up being able to look at all of the things that can go wrong sometimes. So this is something to be aware of if you have a left-facing arrow here, to just understand that, hey, I am seeing the things that could go wrong, and where can I instead open up to possibility? Because I don't want to attract the things that could go wrong. Thinking about manifestation and thinking about the teachings of Abraham Hicks, for example, and the idea of what you focus on is what grows, right? Where your energy goes, that's what flows. So thinking about that, if you have a left-facing arrow, just knowing that that strategic thinking is about keeping you safe, and plus also you don't want to let it drag you down into negative thinking or scarcity thinking. Right-facing arrow is receptive awareness, where instead of strategically weeding things out and looking for specific things, this is an awareness where you're taking it all in. It's this idea of a well where you are full of water, and instead of strategically pointing out things, you instead are waiting for those things to be drawn up out of you. So you're really designed to be present at all times and just open and aware of the things that are coming into your purview. So think about how this colors your midlife phase right now, and what is your awareness? What is your arrow direction? Are you designed to be more strategic or receptive? And how can you lean into your strategy and authority in order to let those components of you flourish? Remember, because it always comes back to our strategy and our authority. So if you are a left-facing arrow and you find yourself strategizing too much, where can you lean into your strategy and authority a little bit more? And this is tricky language here, because when I talk about strategic thinking in terms of the left-facing arrow, I'm not talking about your human design strategy, which is how we are designed to take action in the world. I'm thinking more about the classic definition of strategy, which is more about that conceptualizing and thinking very specifically about A comes first, then B, then C, that type of thing. If you're a right-facing arrow and you're in la la land, for example, how can you bring more clarity in by using your strategy and authority? So with motivation, there is a concept called transference that I wanted to teach you about today, because it's something that we talk a lot about when we talk about motivation. And again, remembering that this is one of the more advanced components to human design. So if all of this is feeling like, oh my God, it's a ton of information, it's like, I don't get it, I would encourage you to simply listen to the episode, let it just wash over you, try to be receptive to the information. And what is going to land for you today is what is meant to land for you today. And maybe you come back and listen in a month or a couple of months and something new will land for you. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. It's simply a chance to dive a little bit more deeply into your human design chart and understand yourself more deeply. So, this idea of transference is like everything in human design, everything's on a spectrum. So, for example, if you have a defined emotional solar plexus, then you are going to have highs and lows of your emotional wave. And there's a spectrum to that. There are going to be high expressions of having an emotionally defined design, and there are going to be low ways of expressing that in your emotional design. So, perhaps if you are emotionally defined and you are expressing it in the highest way, then it means that you're allowing yourself to feel through your emotions. You're allowing yourself to feel through the different waves if you have multiple, or your wave if you just have one. You're allowing yourself to process those emotions and feel through them and then let them go, and then just always being at some place on your wave. Versus the lower expression would be not feeling, really kind of shutting down that connection to your emotions. And that's an example of the spectrum. Same thing with gate expressions. So, for example, the gate of stillness is gate 52. And in the high expression of the gate of stillness, you are connected to this larger awareness, this ability to stay focused for long periods of time because you are aware and tuned into something driven by your strategy and authority. Versus the lower expression of that would be having a real challenge of not knowing what to focus on, of feeling unclear because you're not using your strategy and authority, and then therefore your inability to be still and be in the moment, fully feeling through it. So that's an example relating to a couple of the other components of human design. In this case, for motivation, transference means that you're kind of moving more into not self territory, just like with the other elements of human design, where it's more like your self, who you're designed to be, versus not self, who you're not designed to be. But, what's so important with all of these spectrums is to understand that they are simply markers for us. They help us understand where we have conditioning in our lives. They help us to understand where we are out of alignment. They help us to understand where we might not be following our strategy and authority. That's it. There's no good or bad. And I want to be crystal clear on this point because I think that sometimes using a tool like human design can lead us down more shoulds, which is the opposite fucking thing of what I am trying to do in teaching about human design. You know that I am all about shedding the shoulds. And so human design is simply a tool to do that. So when you are thinking about transference of your motivation, and maybe you realize that you are in transference, it's just a way to check yourself, to bring yourself back into alignment and be like, oh, I realize that I am looking at things this way, and really, actually, my motivation is this. So this is an opportunity for me to redirect. And I would say that is true for any piece of your human design. Going back to the emotional solar plexus, if you're noticing that you're not feeling through your feelings, you're not maybe moving them through your body with movement or expressing them or writing about them, then it's an opportunity for you to see, is that taking you out of alignment? What is happening there? And then what can you do to bring yourself into alignment? Can you make it a point to journal for the next week? Can you commit to movement for the next few days to get yourself feeling better? Just as an example. And in this case, these more subtle pieces of human design, these are, again, just checkpoints. They're ways to say, oh, I see that I'm looking at it this way. I see that this is what's driving me. And maybe I need to check this. I need to move a little closer to what actually feels aligned. Okay, so we've talked about the arrows and the direction. Again, we're talking about the fourth arrow, top right. And with those arrows, we have the color beneath them, and that is the big number in my chart beneath that arrow. So there are 6 of them, colors 1 through 6, and I'm going to go through each of them. I'm going to explain a little bit about what they mean, tell you a little bit about what it looks like from my perspective through the lens of midlife, and then talk about the transference. So how can you support yourself? And then the last thing I'm going to do is give you a journal prompt for each one, or to just give you something to think about when it comes to your motivation. Okay, so if you have the number 1 as a color under your motivation, then you have what's called fear motivation. And listen, a caveat here about the names of the motivations. Some of them can be a little bit triggering, like the word fear. You know, if you have fear motivation, you might be like, oh man, like what? I don't want to have fear motivation, because we have negative connotations with that word. And honestly, in my opinion, this is just classic Ra. This is, Ra, the man who downloaded this whole system. The way he communicated things, they just came off as a little bit repelling, honestly, a little bit shocking. He was a gate of shock, sun gate. So the way that some of this system has been communicated can feel disempowering. But I want you to understand that the meaning behind the words is what is most important, and understanding that versus the actual word and its connotations, because it doesn't even really connote to the word itself. So let's talk about fear motivation. Fear motivation is about being motivated by clarity and caution. So there is a definite sense of safety and security to this motivation. You are motivated to understand the unknown in order for you to create that foundation. It's a one-line color, right? And one lines are the foundation for everything, all of the line expressions in human design. So from a midlife lens, I want you to think about designing the next phase of your life. You're in midlife. What's coming next? And how can you lay the groundwork for yourself to feel safe and secure in this next phase? That is what's going to motivate you. So think about doing some research. One lines are very much about knowledge equals power, knowledge equals understanding, which equals security. So how can you use the flavors of those themes and that color to help you when you're thinking about this next phase of life, or when you're thinking about decisions that you have to make, and how can you use those to inform your strategy and authority? In terms of support and your transference, fear transfers to need motivation. So what you want to think about if you are fear motivation is, when are you instead focused on what's missing? You know, when are you looking at something and just seeing the thing that's missing in the now? Because what happens with that is going to create more scarcity for you as a one line color for motivation, as in fear motivation. That's going to create this feeling of scarcity, which is not what you want. You need foundations. You need that clarity and that confidence in order to move forward. So, where are you only dealing with what has to be done right now instead of planning for the future, instead of creating that foundation in order to continue moving forward? It's like fear motivation. These are the people who are packing, like they're bringing a giant fucking suitcase and three bags. They've got every single possible thing you could think of when they're going on a trip because, you might fall and hurt yourself. So they have the full-on first aid kit versus a couple of Band-Aids and some bacitracin. They've got the mosquito net. They've got the hammock. They've got all of the different things creating that beautiful foundation. We're prepared if anything comes down the line. So when you are thinking about this motivation and what motivates you, some journal prompts to consider are: what feels unknown to you right now? Like, is there anything in your life that is making you feel a little insecure, a little unsettled? And how can you take steps to learn more about that? Even just educating yourself is going to bring some relief there for you. And then thinking about what foundations can you build for yourself to help you bring more clarity and more safety into your life. So again, when you're planning for next phases, maybe your kids are moving out and you're thinking about this big house that you live in. And do you still need this big house? And maybe you decide that you do because you want a place for your kids to come back to that feels safe and secure. Or maybe you decide to downsize, but it's still something that feels safe and secure for you. It's big enough to feel like it's a foundational piece for you that's going to support you. Okay, that is the first of the motivations. Okay, so the second motivation is called hope motivation. And this motivation is all about releasing control. It's all about this idea of everything will work out. It's a very kind of faith-filled motivation. It's this belief in the unseen and just this deep inner knowing of, I just know it's going to work out. So from a midlife lens, whatever you're struggling with, where could you potentially invite in some faith? Where can you work on manifesting by focusing on the best possible outcome? Consider what the best possible outcome could be, and then just recognize that it's already on its way. This is really about being motivated by this deep knowing that whatever is happening is for your best and highest good. It is this willingness to trust, very deeply trust that things are always working out for you. I've definitely heard these affirmations and have said them for myself before, even though this isn't my motivation. Things like, I trust that everything is always working out for me. That is 100% meant for you if you are hope motivation. Now, in terms of support, hope transfers to guilt. So we're going to get into these other motivations, because we're talking about transference at the same time that I'm introducing the new motivations. It's going to be a little bit like you're getting a preview of some of the coming motivations, because that's what I mean by transfer. So hope transfers to guilt, which is where you want to ask yourself, Are you trying to solve problems instead of releasing control and just letting go? Like, let go, let God, let go, let universe. A Ra paraphrase, so again from Ra Uru Hu, who downloaded this system, he says, hope is about knowing when not to act. So when not to act, when you don't push something, when you don't jump into something, when you don't take responsibility for something. It's about knowing when not to do these things and just letting it go, letting it unfold and believing that it's going to work out for the best. So in journaling, I encourage you to consider a struggle and then consider what is the best possible outcome for whatever is going on with you right now. And write about how do you see it coming to fruition? And then think about where can you release more control around that ultimate way that you see it coming to fruition, that best possible outcome. How can you release control around that and just allow it to happen? Okay. Third color motivation is called desire. And this is all about change. It's all about being a leader. It's all about having material possessions in the material world and passion. There's this underlying feeling of passion with this motivation. So considering this through a midlife lens, I encourage you to think about the change theme. Obviously, being in midlife, we are constantly faced with all sorts of different big decisions and big changes, right? Big shifts. So when your last kiddo leaves the nest, what do you get to do in this phase? Move on if you've been considering it. This is the time. You have desire motivation. So go for what you've been wanting to do that maybe you've been putting off because of other people or expectations or those bullshit shoulds that we talk about all the time. So that is what you need to be doing through a desire motivation lens. And in terms of support for this motivation, desire transfers to innocence. And Ra paraphrases this idea of desire as saying that it can be entirely overwhelming because there's this intense need to like move everything, like make shit happen, And so where might you be leaving it up to the universe to figure it out and kind of letting go and just being like, oh, it'll be fine and we're just gonna let the universe take the lead, versus how can you be doing your own leading? How can you be taking very specific steps toward what you desire? If you have desire motivation, where are you just sort of acting like a child in terms of the way that you're conceptualizing things and feeling like, oh, I'm just gonna, observe things and play and like la la la. That's the thing that I think about when I think about it, innocence. Where are you doing that versus stepping into that strong leadership and this like fierce desire? Where are you letting that happen instead? So in terms of journaling, I want you to think about, do you have a vision? Do you have a vision for this next phase of life? And how can you communicate those desires with other people? Also, you might think about, what is your material life like and where do you simply want more? Where do you want better? Those things are aligned for you with this desire motivation. And then where and how can you lean into leadership to get those things, to make those things part of your reality? Okay, fourth color motivation is called need. And need motivation is motivated by what is necessary right now. And because it's a fourth color motivation, there's also this social component to it where it sees what the group needs. It sees what is missing in the group and wants to fill that hole. So I love that I'm recording this during Virgo season because through a midlife lens, it is Virgo season right now, if you're listening to this when I release the episode. So what can go? What can you weed out of your life? What can go or who can go? Who maybe needs to be weeded out of your life? Where can you weed out what is not needed? And instead of avoiding the bad, think about what is missing for the good. So let's say you're going to redesign your bedroom, for example. Somebody with need motivation is probably going to have a pretty minimalist decor style. And so when you're looking around your room and you're thinking about what could be in there, what's going to motivate you will be what are the things that are just missing? What has to be there? You need a bed, right? You need light, perhaps. And maybe the things that you choose to bring personality into your bedroom are a few things that are really beautiful, but it's not about clutter. So this is something that I have to work on. And moving into the support component, need transfers to fear. And fear, remember, it's that the fear people are the ones that are packing every last possible thing. They've got 27 outfits, for one night. They want to have options and whatnot. And sometimes I find myself moving into that a little bit more than just going with what do I need right now? And so you want to think about how are you filling the needs that those things that are missing. And instead, if you are transferring to fear, where are you worrying about all of the things that might be missing or all of the things that might be accomplished instead of what has to be done right now? So if you need motivation, you're not going to have the next 20 steps planned out for something. You're going to have maybe a broad view of what you want to accomplish, and then you're going to have like what I need to do today. And then you're going to move from that. So when you're journaling, thinking about, am I aware of what is needed in the different areas of my life? Or if there is something that is missing, what is missing in my life? And then consider where might you be able to pare down and simplify things? Where can you declutter? Where can you move into only what is necessary in order for you to be your best self? Okay, the next color is color number 5, which is guilt motivation. Again, not the greatest word, but here's what it actually means, which is where these terms can feel like such misnomers. So guilt is actually about being motivated by solving problems, being motivated by what needs to be tweaked about something. And the way I remember it is thinking about what makes you feel guilty for not fixing a problem that you know needs to be fixed. It's like, oh, this pressure to just feel like, oh, I gotta fix this problem. There's something wrong and it needs to be fixed. So through a midlife lens, you are the fixer. So how are you taking your life experience? You've lived this many years. How are you using that to help you solve the problems that you see need solving? How are you using your authority to determine which problems are yours to fix? And this is a key component to the guilt motivation because there are so many problems, right? If you're looking at life with this lens, there are going to be lots of things that are potentials for you to fix, and you have the ability to do it. So what's going to be really important for you is understanding which ones are yours to fix and which ones belong to other people. So this is where your authority has to come in really strongly and just say, okay, I am led here through my inner knowing. This is what I get to solve. This is where I can contribute. So in terms of support, guilt transfers to hope. So now we're on the other side and we can look back to talking about hope and remembering that hope is the motivation where you're just sort of throwing it up to the universe and saying, yep, everything's going to work out. Everything's going to come together. So where are you looking at these problems and instead of actively trying to solve them and look at them through that problem-solving lens, where are you just hoping that they're going to work out? What are you doing, in terms of that transference? So that is a chance for you to be like, oh, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more on the ball with this. Maybe I need to think a little bit more in terms of trusting myself and knowing that I have what it takes to solve this problem if I feel like I'm entering into it through my strategy and authority. So in terms of a couple of journal prompts for you, I would ask, when have you recently solved a problem that you came to through your strategy and authority? Because this is a beautiful way to build evidence for yourself of like, oh, yeah, that this is a great example of a problem that I recently solved that I felt was totally aligned. And it came through my inner knowing. I entered into solving that problem because I was led to it through my inner knowing, my decision maker. I would also ask yourself, what problems are you currently facing that feel like yours to solve? And then what might you do about it? How can you maybe brainstorm some possible solutions in your journal and give them time to percolate? How can you share the solutions with others to potentially get help in solving that problem? Allowing yourself to really lean into thinking that way, because having you as a problem solver to contribute to the well-being of our planet is just such a beautiful, beautiful energy. Okay, and then the last motivation is innocence motivation. And these are the people who are motivated by just going with the flow. It's honestly, the six line motivation is an absence of motivation, really. It's like you are the example of pure innocence. And I want you to think about young children when you think about how you operate. This is your jam. It's about observation. It's about being present in the moment. It's that la 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 that I was talking about earlier. It really is just being in the moment and going with the flow and letting things unfold. So through a midlife lens, I think that this motivation is inviting in your authenticity at like the highest level. This is a 6-line color. 6 lines are, remember, like they're going into the next echelon already. That's why this is kind of an absence of motivation. So where are you being your authentic self? And how can you use that to motivate you to continue doing the same more and more, whatever it is that leads you further and deeper into your authenticity? Now, in terms of support, innocence motivation transfers back to desire. So remember, desire has that like strong energy behind it where you're controlling outcomes. There's that deep sense of control in desire, right? There's, I want this, I'm gonna go get it kind of thing. It's that leadership that like, I've got material needs, I'm gonna go after them. So where are you, instead of just letting things unfold and trusting, where are you trying to control those things? Where are you trying to gain power or control somehow? And then in terms of journaling, I would suggest that you get curious about where you can practice with white space on your calendar. And what I mean by white space is literally chunking out blocks of time where you are not scheduled for anything. And honestly, I recommend that most people engage in this process just because it's a great way to get in touch with your strategy and authority. But I would say for you with innocence motivation, it's super important because you can then see like, what does life bring you? What can you then start thinking about? And how does it make you think when these things come into your life? And it allows you to be fully present with whatever is coming to you. I also would invite you to just think about, what are you observing? What have you fully observed recently? And perhaps in your journal, you might even practice the art of observation. Just sit down and look at what's in front of you and describe it in the most finite detail possible. That is a beautiful, intentional way of encouraging and practicing and experimenting with your innocence motivation. Okay, so this concludes our dive into the 4 transformations, the 4 arrows, and the colors beneath them. These colors are how the rest of our design expresses itself. It colors everything in our design. So I would love for you to drop me a comment on YouTube or send me a DM and tell me, what is your motivation, and let me know, how do you see it working in your life? Do you see it working in your life? Or does it feel completely detached and you're like, what the hell are you even talking about, Lori? Tell me those things. I want to know all the things. I want to know how it's working for you or not. So please drop that in the comments on YouTube or send me a DM on socials. And if you want to dive into real transformation with one-to-one coaching, then work with me this fall and let's launch. Let's move into an authenticity experiment and let's get you feeling the most you that you have ever felt. It is midlife. This is the time. This is your time to shed those bullshit shoulds and start aligning with who you came here to be. So let's do it. Let's fucking go. Send me a DM if you want. You can go to my page. I will, of course, drop a link in the show notes to book a call with me if you would rather have a conversation. We can do email. I'll leave that information in the show notes, but reach out to me and let's start a conversation about what it might look like to work together to bring this experiment to life. So thank you so much for listening, as always, and until next time. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Midlife by Design. I hope that it gave you the guidance you need to understand this piece of motivation. Even though it's one of the more nuanced pieces of human design, I think it's super helpful to understand these 4 transformations. So I hope that you have enjoyed this series. And if you have, of course, please share them with your friends and check out the links to work with me in the show notes and or donate to the show. I so appreciate you being here, and I am sending you the strength to let go of what no longer serves you, joy to fill your days, and the clarity to be who you came here to be.